From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
We are trying to convince Wendy's to sign the Fair Food program in the same way that McDonald's, Burger King, Subway, and in total 11 corporations have done it until now.
Hundreds of farm workers and their supporters are in New York City ahead of Wendy's shareholder meeting to demand it improve working conditions for those who pick tomatoes used in its products. We'll speak with one of the farm workers. Then, as the carbon dioxide in the air hits 400 parts per million for the first time in human history, instead of reducing reliance on fossil fuels, we'll look at the controversial practice of geoengineering, the deliberate altering of the Earth to decrease the level of greenhouse gas emissions.
Burgeoning commercial engagement in geoengineering is creating a lobby with an interest in more research and eventually deployment. Such a lobby is naturally predisposed to argue that pursuing emission cuts is unrealistic or politically impossible, and therefore geoengineering is a sensible alternative.
We'll speak with Clive Hamilton, author of Earthmasters, The Dawn of the Age of Climate Engineering. And we'll go to Seattle, where teachers and students are celebrating a victory. High schools there will no longer have to conduct standardized tests in reading and math. We'll speak with Jesse Hagapian, a history teacher at Garfield High School. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The U.S. appears to have carried out its second drone strike inside Yemen in the past 3 days. 2 people were killed today when a drone hit their vehicle south of the capital, Sana'a. At least 4 people were killed and several others wounded in a drone attack Saturday. Local officials say the victims were suspected al-Qaeda militants, but their identities have not been confirmed. The White House has announced President Obama will deliver a speech at Washington, D.C.'s National Defense University on Thursday on a wide number of counterterrorism issues. Obama will discuss the legal framework underpinning national security efforts, including the drone program. He'll also address the status of Guantanamo Bay, where over 100 foreign nationals are on hunger strike against their indefinite imprisonment. Protests were held Friday to mark the Guantanamo hunger strike's 100th day. Outside the White House, demonstrators wearing orange jumpsuits and carrying signs were arrested after refusing to leave the sidewalk. In New York, dozens of people gathered for a rally in Times Square.
As far as I can tell, President Obama wants to say that, Congress is holding him up, or there's these laws, or it's complicated. As far as I can tell, it's not complicated. That's a military prison down there, and President Obama is the commander-in-chief of the military. As far as I can tell, he has to pick up his phone, call someone, and say, close the prison.
Having them in Guantanamo is violating the Constitution and therefore threatening, hurting the rights of Americans in general. If our government is violating our Constitution and our Bill of Rights, that hurts us all.
At least 30 of the more than 100 hunger strikers are being force-fed through nasal tubes pushed into their stomachs, a practice critics say amounts to torture. The Syrian government and opposition rebels are in the midst of intense clashes in the city of Qusair near the Lebanese border. Activists are claiming dozens of Syrian government and Hezbollah fighters have been killed in fighting with the rebels, but the toll has not been confirmed. The U.S. says Russia has stepped up its support for the regime of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad with a shipment of advanced missiles. At the Pentagon, Army General Martin Dempsey, the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, criticized Russia for aiding Assad.
It's at the very least an unfortunate decision that will embolden the regime and prolong the suffering. So it's ill-timed and very unfortunate. It pushes the standoff distance a little more, increases risk, but not impossible to overcome. What I really worry about is that Assad will decide that since he's got these systems, he's somehow safer.
Iraq is enduring some of its worst sectarian violence in months. More than 40 people were killed today when car bombings hit Shiite areas in the capital Baghdad and the southern city of Basra. At least 76 people were killed in a series of bombings Friday, Iraq's deadliest day in 8 months. More than 150 people have been killed in sectarian violence over the past week. A leading Pakistani politician was shot dead outside her home in Karachi Saturday amidst an ongoing standoff over last week's election. Zahra Shahid Hussain headed the women's wing of the PTI, which took second place in the national vote. PTI leader Imran Khan had called for a revote amidst a wave of campaign-related violence. On Sunday, Khan accused Altaf Hussain, leader of the rival party MQM, of responsibility for Zahra Hussein's murder.
I hold Altaf Hussain responsible for this murder. Whatever happens, I am firmly standing against this murder because it is not the first time it's happened. It has happened several times before. They wait outside the house of their target, just like what happened to Zahra. I hold them responsible. They have issued two threats, one to the journalist and the other to our workers and supporters when they staged a protest.
Over 150 people have been killed in the violence surrounding Pakistan's election. Former Argentine dictator General Jorge Rafael Videla has died at the age of 87. He was serving a life sentence for murder, torture, and kidnapping under his regime. He helped lead the military coup that unseated President Isabel Perón in 1976. He later served 5 years in prison before a presidential pardon set him free in 1990. 2 decades later, he was retried and sentenced to life behind bars. Estela de Carlotto of the human rights group Grandmothers of the Plaza de Mayo criticized Videla for refusing to account for the whereabouts of those who disappeared under his watch, including the babies of political prisoners taken from their biological parents.
Nosotros sentimos es un alivio. We
feel so relieved, but at the same time this weight, because he didn't speak or contribute to us knowing where those 30,000 people that we are looking for are, or the whereabouts of the 400 grandchildren that the grandmothers of Plaza de Mayo are still looking for, who are disappeared and are alive. There was not a scrap, not a single word to help with this search. On the contrary, he reaffirmed those crimes.
Videla died while being tried for his role in Operation Condor, a coordinated effort by Latin American military rulers to target their political opponents in the 1970s and 80s. Another former dictator, Reinaldo Bignone, remains on trial in the case. The head of the Associated Press says the news group has not ruled out legal action against the Justice Department for the warrantless spying uncovered over the past week. The Justice Department is admitted to seizing the work, home, and cell phone records of almost 100 AP reporters and editors. The action came as part of a probe into the leaks behind an AP story about CIA operations in Yemen. Speaking to CBS, AP Chief Executive Gary Pruitt called the Justice Department's spying unconstitutional.
We don't question their right to conduct these sort of investigations. We just think they went about it the wrong way. So sweeping, so secretively, so abusively and harassingly and overbroad that it constitutes, that it is an unconstitutional act.
As the AP spying scandal unfolds, details have emerged in a separate case of government spying on a journalist. The Washington Post reports the Justice Department tracked a reporter's phone records and State Department visits and even received a search warrant to read his personal emails. The reporter, Fox News correspondent James Rosen, was investigated for obtaining details of a secret government report on North Korea in 2009. The probe of Rosen's communications has helped lead to charges against State Department security advisor Stephen Jinwoo Kim, who's accused of providing him with classified national defense information. Investigators used records of Rosen's phone calls and Kim's security badge to track their conversations. Kim's trial is expected in 2014. The White House has acknowledged top administration lawyers knew about alarming activity at the Internal Revenue Service well before President Obama was informed. The IRS has acknowledged over the past week that right-wing groups received extra scrutiny in their bid for tax-exempt status. The Office of the White House Counsel said it received word of the IRS controversy over 2 weeks before Obama was finally made aware earlier this month. Testifying before Congress just 2 days after he was forced to resign, acting IRS Commissioner Stephen Miller apologized but said the additional scrutiny of right-wing groups was not politically motivated.
As acting commissioner, I want to apologize on behalf of the Internal Revenue Service for the mistakes that we made and the poor service we provided. The affected organizations and the American public deserve better. I think that what happened here was that foolish mistakes were made by people trying to be more efficient in their workload selection. The listing described in the report, while intolerable, was a mistake, and not an act of partisanship.
A federal judge has temporarily blocked a recent Arkansas law banning abortion at 12 weeks of pregnancy. The ban was scheduled to take effect in August, but on Friday, Judge Susan Weber Wright issued a preliminary injunction pending a final ruling on its legality. Chicago teachers are in their third and final day of a cross-city march against school closures in low-income communities. The Chicago Teachers Union launched the more than 30-mile trek on Saturday, calling it Our City, Our Schools, Our Voice. They're protesting Mayor Rahm Emanuel's plan to shutter 54 public schools, mostly in African-American neighborhoods. Some 30,000 students will be impacted. A coalition of parents filed 2 federal lawsuits seeking to stop the closures last week. The board of the Chicago Public Schools is slated to vote on the plan on Wednesday. Thousands of Philadelphia high schoolers staged a walkout on Friday to fight a wave of budget cuts hitting their classrooms. The school district has proposed ending arts and sports programs, as well as firing support staff like secretaries, librarians, and counselors to close a $300 million funding gap. On Friday, a crowd of over 2,000 students and teachers marched from the school district to Philadelphia City Hall, blocking traffic.
If you're planning on cutting back sports and arts and then you want us to be involved in our community and stay out of the streets, it's kind of hard to do that.
It's not equitable compared to the suburbs, and these children are told the message they don't count. And it's tragic.
The new funding cuts follow the Philadelphia School District's vote to close 23 of the city's public schools earlier this year. A gay man was shot to death in New York City Friday night in what police are calling a hate crime. The victim, Mark Carson, was with a male companion when the suspect accosted the pair and followed them for several blocks. The suspect, Elliot Morales, confronted Carson and his companion with an anti-gay remark before opening fire. Police arrested Morales after he fled the scene. Carson was 32 years old. He worked in a Midtown yogurt shop. A friend described him as a proud gay man who didn't have a negative bone in his body. The shooting occurred just blocks from the Stonewall Inn, the West Village landmark that launched the modern-day gay and lesbian rights movement after a 1969 police raid. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.